you can sort of think of this leveling process as analogous to a loss of species during a reduction in habitat, right? You have a whole bunch of people, then a small number of them go over and settle someplace, and so you have less variation because you have, in effect, a reduced habitat for the variants, and some of the variants disappear. And generally, the most uncommon variants, that's not always the case. And these results are largely consistent with the historical record of early English migration in North America. The one thing that's kind of interesting is that we know that Puritans came largely from East Anglia. There was a really big Essex component to the immigration to Massachusetts, but it doesn't show up in this data, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know what that's about, and it's worth some thought. So, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Are there any questions for Robert?
Well, I'd like to address the question both to John Rebund and Robert Shackleton, but it's a question that occurs to me primarily regarding this data. Dialect geography looks in two directions. It gives us information about the structure of language and helps us solve problems about the causality of the language change, its the transmission mechanism, the kinds of questions that Martinet and Moulton have addressed. It also looks to culture and tries to use linguistic data to explain settlement patterns and to illuminate the sort of issues that you just looked at. So it occurred to me that once we've aggregated data in this way, we've greatly improved the capacity of using language data to explain cultural and historical facts. But we've lost it doesn't look towards the other direction, which is to try to get at the mechanism of linguistic structure. And I think that perhaps we have to accept the fact that the more we aggregate, the more we increase the value of our linguistic data to look outward. But of course, the less it's going to look inward. Now, I just wondered if this seems to you a legitimate way to look at the enterprise.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. First of all, I share your concern that we would like to understand linguistic structure better by understanding the aggregate patterns that we find. And in fact, I am working on that now. I think there are techniques to do this. For example, trying to find out what the most important components are, most important contributors are to that gross aggregate distance. A very simple thing that we've done, for example, is just to find that it's just to take this multidimensional scaling analysis, which identifies factors of analysis, and then find out which words correlate most strongly with the dimensions we find, to identify where the atoms of linguistic change are that are creating this aggregate difference. And there are other alternatives we're exploring as well. But right now, I don't have a better answer than that, but we're exploring it.
Well, I'd have to agree. I think that that this kind of approach that I've taken does not really help very much in trying to figure out where a language is going. This isn't. You have to look at, to the extent that you can figure out where a language is going, you really want to look at details. And even in this kind of, using this stuff for this kind of historical exploration, I find that the aggregates are really useful in some ways, but then you still want to pull out the data and say, okay, well, what are the Western features that are showing up in the South? And what are the Eastern features that are showing up in the North that are distinct? And you really do end up wanting to go and pull out the individual features and think through, well, why is this happening? Or what is it? What features and why would they might have been preserved or lost? So I don't think that doing this kind of aggregation, it doesn't substitute for doing the hard work of actually looking at detail, in detail data into detail. It's just complements it. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.